doing that from the very beginning, I think it has been really important because it just sets the basis and the expectations for those engineers that you cannot get access to everything. I'm sorry, that's the way the world works, right?
Who says tech can't be human?
What is going on, Hacker Valley fam? Welcome back to the show. We are live. We are completely live. This is a LinkedIn Live. This is going to be going out on all the platforms. So make yourself at home. And I got some exciting news. We have a three-peat, our first three-peat guest that we've ever had, because let's be honest, this guest is absolutely amazing. Our guest that is going to be joining us to talk about how threat actors are accessing our SaaS environments. We've brought in Jaime Blasco. Jaime is the co-founder and CTO at Nudge Security. Jaime, welcome back to the podcast. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, good to see you. It's always fun.
Always fun. Last time you were on, we were speaking about OAuth grants and how risky it can be giving out those OAuth grants. We see pop-ups pop up when we connect SaaS app A to SaaS app B, and we just hit allow. It's almost like the accepting of terms of service and those agreement terms that we too commonly click on without really reading and understanding them. This time around, though, we're talking about the worst case scenario. What if someone has exploited the fact that SaaS apps are installed and they ultimately breach them, steal data, or even worse, have the opportunity to remotely do something like code execution or just modify a SaaS app?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a problem that we are seeing more and more often, where SaaS is an important piece of either the entry point of a breach, or actually it was used during lateral movement, or even post compromise activity, where threat actors were using SaaS applications to actually steal data, or even perform social engineering attacks with employees, etc. And we'll love to talk about some of those very specific cases we have seen in the past.
So let's go ahead and jump into it. We know that SaaS apps and SaaS adoption has pretty much become an addiction. It's almost like it feels like a birthright and a necessity to be productive and collaborative. And I think the world is starting to wake up to the fact that they could have threats associated with them. They could have misconfigurations associated with them. When you look at beyond the risky OAuth grants and when you look at breaches of SaaS apps, how big is this problem today?
And it's becoming an issue, right? And we have seen cases over and over again in the last couple of years where pretty big companies have been compromised using SaaS applications, or even supply chain attacks where adversaries were actually compromising a SaaS vendor, and we see hundreds of SaaS applications per environment. But this is just things that are accessible to anyone on the internet, right? Even from a data breach perspective, we are looking at something like six data breaches in your supply chains on average with the companies that we are working. And more importantly, one of the things that we see is like the vast majority of these SaaS applications are not managed by IT and security teams, right? They are managed by the employees themselves, and that's creating a huge risk for organizations out there.
One topic that comes up over and over and over again, I'm sure you're hearing it a lot, supporting so many organizations, that generative AI, things like large language models, who doesn't use ChatGPT? Last time we were on, we spoke about how you all use Copilot to help generate code. What are the implications that an organization faces? We know about data leakage, but can you be breached by using something like a Gen AI solution and ultimately having some issue with that?
Absolutely. I think that the most important thing to consider is when you are when you're using these tools, like most of the times you are not reading the terms and conditions, right, and privacy policies. You don't know where that data is being stored, for how long, whether they are using it to train models, whether they are sharing with third parties, and everything that touches that data, it's a candidate to have a breach in the future, and someone can access that information. So pretty much, you gotta be, you wanna have a policy that says, hey, anything we are sharing, especially with those public facing services, can be disclosed at any point. That's kind of my policy, right? And then the other thing we are seeing is like, organizations are moving really fast with these things, right? Engineering teams find new Gen AI tools, they implement them in the environment, and
Hmm.
many times they're bypassing basic controls, right? Like from a security perspective, but also from a management perspective. As I said, a lot of these things are brought in the environment by engineering teams and not the IT teams. Therefore, there is a lack of management. And back to, like, are we enforcing MFA? Are we, who is managing those accounts? We see a lot of customers that are building applications using AI in some of these tools, and they're allowing those tools to access, private information. A lot of one of the techniques that they use is like this thing called RAG, like retrieval augmented generation, which is you can give an AI model access to certain information. From, it can be private data, it can be data about your customers. So a lot of these tools actually have access to that data, either from a file perspective, but many times from an API base, where you are storing API tokens in those
Hmm.
applications so they can access the data. Sometimes you are uploading files into those applications like OpenAI, or sometimes you are creating OAuth tokens or API based access, as we described, right? So a lot of these tools actually do have tokens that allow them to access other environments. So if those tools are compromised, then they can be used to move laterally and access other places in your environment. So it's a big mess out there. And then the other big thing is, it's again that supply chain, right? Like especially on the AI side of things, we see very core, providers like OpenAI, Hugging Face, that
Hmm.
are pretty much in every environment out there. So like someone was to compromise Hugging Face, it could probably get access to like pretty much any major technology company out there. So making sure where those very critical providers are in your supply chain, and making sure that you have monitoring in place, and make sure that you have plans in place if or when that happens, because it will eventually happen to you.
One thing that comes to mind when you mention that is the fact that OpenAI released GPTs. And with GPTs, they allow you to connect to several different tools. You can now connect them together and have a tool A like Zapier ask tool B like Google Drive, have it interact with each other and ask a question. And that kind of like, really highlights that the fact that yeah, you might think that if someone were to breach this SaaS app, what's the worst, data leakage that could be devastating, but maybe you feel as though you don't have customer information in there, but the fact that there's scopes, there might be read and then write, and then not only to that, but even to the billing console as well. I think that you look at things like ransomware. When ransomware uh, groups don't get their way, sometimes they like to cause a little bit of havoc. And I know with APIs, you might be able to cancel your subscription, and that could really cause a big disruption to your business for an application that's not necessarily storing critical information.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have seen cases in the past where like ransomware actors have attempted to do something like this from a SaaS perspective, where they will go and encrypt all your files in a SaaS application, or
Mm,
delete all the information, then make a copy of the information. So like from a SaaS perspective, you can also get a ransomware attack, right? Especially if you're not doing backups. If the SaaS application itself doesn't have a backup strategy in place, it can become a target of ransomware gangs, or threat actors that want to do ransomware at some point, right? I can think of like source code repos as well, can be used in that regard. There's a lot of opportunities for threat actors to exploit that as well.
right. So let's talk a little bit about who's being targeted and who's targeting who. Like, I know you have a threat intelligence background, and also there's a congratulations in order. You have more than 80 customers. Big congrats on that. That's huge. Um, for looking at the lay of the land, your customers and also the threat groups. Who are the threat groups, and who are the companies that are often being targeted?
Yeah, in terms of like pure SaaS, or either from a initial vector perspective, or kind of like where SaaS became critical in one of these breaches. I can think of a few cases that come to mind. Like I remember EA, Electronic Arts, a few years ago. The way the threat actor got access to the environment was because they were able to buy a session token from a provider out there in the dark web, right? That was selling stolen tokens. And the way this works is like one of your employees may install malware for whatever reason, like any type of like banking malware or any type of like remote access tool. So you are unlucky that one of your employees get compromised by malware, and then the one of the things that malware does is just like look at your browser activity, and anything that looks like a session token. When you log in with an application and it gives you a token in order to keep that session alive, they exfiltrate those tokens, right? So like one of the Electronic Arts employees got targeted by this. They were able to buy an access token for the Slack, the Electronic Arts Slack instance, and then when they use that token to access the Slack instance as that employee, and then once they were inside the Slack instance, they social engineer the IT team
Mm.
to give them access to other tools. So like again, this is a cool one, right? Because the initial access was a SaaS application, and then they use that to move laterally in the environment using social engineers. The other threat actor that comes to mind is like APT-29. Some people call them Midnight Blizzard. Like this is really the Russian government one. SBR, one of their intelligence agencies, and they have been all over the place, right? But the is specialty is really government, and there's been a lot of targets in the U.S. recently in the last few years. They're really good at Azure and Office 365, kind of like focus, where they have a lot of knowledge in terms of Microsoft products, and we have seen over and over again how they have been able to either exploit vulnerabilities in Microsoft products, or do things like password spraying of Office 365 tenants out there. That means that for accounts that are reusing passwords, and they are able to find those passwords in data breaches, etc., and you don't have MFA enabled in those accounts, then they are able to just find those credentials. Uh, a few months ago, the latest one was because they were able to compromise Microsoft by finding a testing tenant out there. They were able to use as a testing tenant to find a testing tenant for a Microsoft. For Microsoft out there, they use password spraying to access that environment, and then they use a variety of techniques to escalate from that environment. And interestingly enough, they were able they this group likes to use things like OAuth applications, where they will use install new OAuth applications for maintaining persistence in the environment, or sometimes they will modify existing OAuth applications so they can use it later on. And even we have seen where incident response teams come and clean up the environment, they are able to come back because they use some they modified one of the existing OAuth applications to keep access to that environment. So again, this group is pretty. They're top tier, like they're pretty good, and that they are very knowledgeable in terms of Microsoft environment. So keep an eye, if especially if you're an NGO or government, or you work for government entities, you are a target of these guys. So you should keep an eye, especially on your Azure and Office 365 environments, because they are definitely hitting you, or they will be hitting you at some point.
Whether you got Google or Microsoft, I mean, that's crown jewels for most companies and teams. That's your emails, it's really your productivity and your collaboration suite, right? Like, I think keeping an eye on that is important, whether you're large or small, but especially if you're the government. Like, you never really know someone's workflow. I think it's always surprising. I love to do like co-piloting sessions where I side saddle or someone side saddles me, and we kind of like go through each other's processes, because it's shocking sometimes to see the route that people take. Like, and I'm sure it's even more shocking now that there's so many SaaS apps. It's like, well, first I go to this application, then I go to this one, and then I make some magic, and I go to this other one, and then drop the resources and outcome there. I think that we definitely got to always stay vigilant, especially for those specific applications that we use our workspaces from. I have to jump in for a second. Our sponsor for this episode, Nudge Security, wanted me to ask you a question. How big is your SaaS attack surface? Finding out the answer to this can feel like an impossible task. Nudge is here to help. Their patented approach to SaaS discovery finds all SaaS accounts ever created by anyone in your organization. They also alert you as new SaaS apps are introduced. The best part, you'll have a full SaaS inventory in minutes. No agents, no browser plugins, no network proxies are required to use Nudge. For each SaaS app that Nudge Security does discover, they provide you a full list of users, authentication methods, and MFA coverage. You'll have a full inventory of app-to-app OAuth connections, scopes, and risk scores, with the ability to revoke risky OAuth grants in just 2 clicks. Nudge Security also includes playbooks to automate those tedious, time-consuming tasks like user access review and employee offboarding. Take control of your SaaS security posture with Nudge Security. You can start a 14-day trial by visiting nudgesecurity.com/Hacker Valley. I personally speak to the founders of every sponsor we bring on, and without a doubt, I can say that Jaime and the Nudge Security team are building something special. By checking out our sponsors, that's the best way to support the show. So be sure to head over to nudgesecurity.com/Hacker Valley and let them know we sent you. Thank you, Nudge, for sponsoring this episode. I wanted to then pivot into TTPs. You already mentioned a few, Jaime, with password spraying, with exploiting risky OAuth grants and tricking people to accept new OAuth grants. I wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about session cookie theft. This is something that has been around for a while. I feel like it's maybe managed and controlled in a way with multi-factor authentication, but I wanted to get your take on how is the world doing with that specific TTP, session cookie theft, and what's the current status of that?
Yeah, definitely. So we did mention that for that electronic arts, right? How that Slack session token could be used for that. Other cases that come to mind are like, Lapsus. If you remember Lapsus, they love Okta, right? They are the ones that are always targeting using Okta to access environments. And you probably are familiar with some of their high profile, like, Okta, Microsoft, Nvidia, like Ubisoft. They've been all over. And one of the things they do, there was also this case where Okta got compromised, right? And attackers were able to access the support portal for Okta. And just so you know, like, another thing that I want people to understand is, like, attackers love your ticketing system and they love your support portal. Why? Because customers upload all sorts of things there, including session tokens, right? So one of the issues that Okta had is, like, they had a support portal where customers would upload browser dumps of, like, failures that we were having, and in some instances that will include session tokens that were valid. So attackers were using that to compromise other companies, including, like, Cloudflare went through this, and a few others. So the same goes for Jira, right? We have seen cases where people are dumping logs into Jira, and that may include session tokens. Or another cool thing we have seen is some of these threat actors accessing Jira and other ticketing systems, people were storing bug bounty reports that haven't been patched yet, right? So like they will be able to actually access vulnerabilities that haven't been patched, so they could use it to further access the environment, right? So there is a lot of information in these places, not just session tokens, but a lot of things that actors can use. Developers sometimes make mistakes and upload log files or just paste API tokens by mistake in this system. So like there is so much that you can do. Even in Slack and Microsoft Teams, I have seen cases where people share API tokens, and then guess what? If an attacker has access to the Slack or Microsoft Teams environment, they can actually search for those tokens. So like
True.
it's hard out there. You gotta be extremely careful with these things.
That's clever though. I mean, you look at things like Zendesk or even GitHub issues, that GitHub issues page for a repo. I've worked at organizations where we've used, like internally, we've used GitHub and we've shared some pretty sensitive information. We've shared information about vulnerabilities. Hey, if this was this patch is so important because if it's not patched, here's the ramification. And just that bit of information, I'm sure could give the adversary an idea, especially if they have access to see that comment, like, okay, perfect. This is the exact thing that I'm going to try to exploit. And you're so right with the IT service management tickets, because that's where you typically ask for your vulnerabilities to be patched.
Yeah, exactly. And think about Jira, Confluence, Slack, Microsoft Teams. Anything where your employees are like collaborating, there's always a risk to have like critical information out there. So like even doing more like DLP based solutions for those SaaS applications where you can find those secrets being shared and make sure that you revoke those. It's something that I really recommend because it's a very easy mistake to make, and something that sometimes you don't have visibility into as a security or IT team, right?
It's been really cool to know you over the years, because when we first met, it was back in San Francisco. A mutual friend introduced us, and you were killing the game in threat intelligence. And back then, looking at threat intelligence, this was probably about 7 or so years ago. Threat intelligence was all about looking at things like IOCs, trying to find malicious applications and trying to find out even malicious tactics, techniques, and protocols and behaviors as well. And now we live in a SaaS first world, but I would imagine there's still the possibility to have a malicious SaaS application. So, is that possible? Is that a thing to have malicious SaaS applications?
Yeah, so you can have things like malicious auth tokens, and we have discussed some of these things. You can actually, from a supply chain perspective, and we have seen these in a few cases where Lazarus, for instance, it's a North Korean actor that it focuses on cryptocurrency companies, fintech companies. They love supply chain breaches where they target SaaS companies, and then they use update mechanisms to deploy malware in the customer base, right? We have seen about, I'm not gonna name any companies, but we have seen about a bunch of those happening, and I'll mention a couple of them that are not critical. If you remember, three CX is one of the latest ones.
Mm.
A lot of cryptocurrency wallets as well, but basically they will use that SaaS access. So when you are a customer of that company and you have some sort of endpoint in your employee base, they are able to access your endpoints by releasing a compromised version of an updated version of that software, right? So that's one of the things. The other cool thing that I've seen recently is using SaaS applications from an attacker perspective to actually social engineer people in an organization. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say that your organization that doesn't use Monday.com, right? But as an attacker, I'm gonna create, you know, uh, hackerballet.monday.com, right? And that, since you haven't claimed that, as an attacker, I can invite your employees. and trick them
Mm.
into believing that that's the corporate mandate.com instance. And they start using it, they start putting information, they start connecting things. And then me as an admin, have access to the environment. So there's very unique TTPs that are gonna show up more and more often that we need to learn as defenders, because these things open a lot of possibilities in terms of like kind of novel ways of exploiting your employees and access into your environment.
The craziest thing happened to Hacker Valley recently. We were on the hunt for a new videographer. And, we were just minding our own business, going to, job boards like LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and going through the hiring process. Along the way, we started to get a ton of emails saying, "Hey, I'm so excited to join Hacker Valley. Thank you so much for the offer, Hacker Valley." And we started to think to ourselves, why one email that like that is one thing, but we got dozens of emails from people thinking that they were about to start Hacker Valley. I guess there was a threat actors out there that were looking at who is listing jobs and who are those candidates within that job pool, and then reaching out to them saying, "Hey, sign this DocuSign. Give us your social security number, fill out all this information that you need." And when you start a job, you got to fill out your I-9, which you got to give out your passport number. You might even have to give out your birth certificate if you don't have a passport. So people were sharing such sensitive information. And I looked at that as like a malicious app, because they were using known applications, but in a very malicious way to really dupe people and get all their sensitive information.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually there are like two very high profile, and unfortunately I can't remember whether this is public, so I can disclose the name of the companies, but I can talk about at least one of them. I'm pretty sure is public, but where this actually happened in terms of like uh one of them was Lazarus, and we already talked about them, right? Where they will go through the interview process and how they will get the job and then they will get credentials to your Google or Office environment as an employee, and then they will use that once they get that access,
Oh.
right? Um, the other
What?
thing, yeah, I mean, very crazy. And the other thing, um, this also happened with APT 29, a super high profile, where there was even like a Zoom call that happened, and it's not really clear, like if no one noticed if it was a deep fake or what happened. But there's been a couple of cases where that happened, not just as a new employee, but like think about resetting MFA, right? Where I reach out to IT and I say, hey, I lost my MFA, I need a new one. And then IT is like, well, who are you? Let's get on a call. And some of these actors somehow have been able to fake that, right? So that means that there is someone out there that is doing a deep fake or something like that, or somehow the IT people really didn't pay attention. There was one where this was a phone call, and the company actually disclosed, and this is public, that the threat actor did a deep fake of the voice of the employee in order to reset the MFA device. So again, very sophisticated social engineering techniques. And I'm glad you mentioned this, because back to that deep fake use case, I think it's gonna become more and more obvious that this is a force multiplier for social engineering attacks.
Yes.
And I suspect we're gonna see these more and more often. So I really think every company out there should review their IT policy in terms of like how they are resetting passwords, how they are resetting MFA devices, how they are verifying that someone is who they're saying they they are, right? Because this is gonna happen over and over again, and everyone needs to have a plan in place to verify these things, verify that not just it's a human, but it's the human that it's saying it is, right?
Right. What I've always loved about the cybersecurity space is, as you're building your product, you could always use your product, and it's like immediate feedback. And, especially if you're building something nice that works well, then you get to also benefit from that protection. So I'm going to put you in the hot seat for a second. Before Nudge was GA, before you were, ready to share the solution with customers, What did you do for SaaS security?
Yeah, we obviously running nuts at nuts, right? Like, and as you said, like dog food.
Oh yeah.
That's the number one thing that any company out there should go through. Um, we gonna give some names of like control that we use, but one of the big focuses is obviously cloud security, right? We run in AWS, making sure that's least privilege, that no one has access to the environment, is properly the way developers interact with that environment is very well architected in terms of like committing code, needing X number of reviews, automated, code scanning, making sure we spend a lot of time architecting and protecting the CI/CD environments to make it really hard for a threat actor to actually exploit anything in there. Making sure that if there is a supply chain compromise in terms of like a library that we use or a component that we use, that we reduce the risk when that happens, right? So there's a lot of pieces in terms of like that development experience and how we put things in production. And then everything that is critical that can be used to access that production environment. Again, only a few people have access to that, and only the people that really need access. And that access is really well constrained to what's needed. So if someone needs read-only access, it's read-only access to a specific information, to a specific services. So again, like doing that from the very beginning, I think it has been really important because it just sets the basis and the expectations for those engineers that you cannot get access to everything. I'm sorry, that's the way the world works, right? I'm pushing back on them when they ask for that access, even though that will make their lives easier. You always have to have this into account, which is, well, if a threat actor gets access to those credentials or the laptop of that employee, could they use that level of access to pivot into something more nefarious? And many times the answer is yes, right? So how do you do that, for instance, like when you have to do it, how do you do it in a time based, right? Like we have some software that we use for access, for temporary access to tools, right? So like if an engineer needs access to the database to debug something read only, they have to request access. It has to be approved, and it's fully automated where those credentials disappear after a certain period of time, right? So a lot of like constraining that access, it pays off a lot because again, even if an actor it's able to access your environment, you are fairly confident that they will at least have a hard time pivoting into customer data, pivoting into your production environment, and you can contain them. And then more importantly, again, making sure you have all the visibility in place to find them if for some reason they do get access to your environment, find them very quickly, kicking them out very quickly, and having enough, log and all the trails from every tool to completely understand what they did in the environment, right? That's very important. I think the last thing, and sorry, because I'm getting too long with this. I think the last thing is they're low hanging fruit in terms of like, you know, very low effort high impact things that you can do. Like I love like honey tokens as well, right? Like where you create service accounts that no one is using, so if an attacker finds them and use them, you pretty much find them. So like spraying a lot of those things in your environment
Hmm.
is it pays off, right? Because it's very easy to do, and chances are that the actor is gonna trip in one of those things eventually if they do get access to some of those tools.
Wow. All I could say is wow. And I say wow because when someone joins a team, especially if it's a startup or even a larger company, their first inclination is to be productive. It's to, if it's a developer, it's to get in there and start reviewing code, to start writing code and committing code. And what it kind of sounds like and what the reality is today is it's not always that straightforward to get started. There's guardrails that we have to put in place since we're using so many SaaS applications and we're sharing data more freely. There's guardrails that we need because we could easily get ourselves checked, get ourselves breached, or just leak the information that we don't necessarily want to share. If I had a magical crystal ball, or let's say you have a magical crystal ball because you're the expert, you help a lot of organizations. When we met about 7 years ago, it was all about having applications installed on your device. I wouldn't have thought that, 7 years ago, I wouldn't have thought we would be here today with email fully in the cloud. Like many organizations that I've spoken to, banks, healthcare organizations, they don't have their email on prem, and it's for good reason. Today, we live in a world that is all SaaS. What do you predict will be the world that we live in 5 years for where applications are hosted and executed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I hate predictions because I'm always wrong. But I think if you look at the history of technology, we have had these cycles where things kind of go from distributed to centralized, distributed to centralized, right? We went through some of those cycles. I wouldn't be surprised if we come back to like a place like that in the future. I think one of the things to keep an eye on is obviously, I mean, AI is probably going to change how we interact
Hmm.
with services, and more importantly, it's probably going to change SaaS companies themselves, right? Because I truly believe that it's going to be really easy to build SaaS applications in the future where, AIs are going to be able to write most of the code for you. So we're going to see an insane amount of new apps being developed because anyone can be a developer all of a sudden, right? Anyone with an idea can create an application. That's going to introduce very interesting things from a security perspective. So I think we're going to be in business for a long time. I think the other thing that worries me a little bit from an AI perspective is like I see, the next big wave for AI. If things are on track, and we believe like the next big thing is going to be how these models can reason a little bit better. It will enable like what we call agents, right? Which is like you give them instructions and then go and interact with systems and figure it out. If that works, we're gonna live in an environment where agents are just in your network, agents are in your browser, agents are in your email, and that's gonna be such a nightmare from a security perspective, right? Especially because we're moving so fast with deploying AI models where we haven't really figured out some of the basics, like prompt injection and things like that are still an issue because that no one has figured out how to fix them. So imagine the level of social engineering that you can do to some of these models when they are interacting with different things in the environment. Imagine if I can, prompt engineer, like prompt inject one of these agents to do something nefarious for me. It's just like it opens the door to a lot of new attack vectors once we have these things just, doing things autonomously. And, I think that's going to create huge opportunities for new companies, but also existing companies, how we help our customers, get ready for those two trends that I do think will be happening soon.
Bring on the agents. I'm ready. I've been trying my best to embrace the AI space and implement it where it makes sense on the use cases that are going to help us the most. And I definitely have always been interested in things like SaaS security. I'm working on a book right now for attack surface management. Very excited about that. And I definitely think that y'all will be in business for a while. You're solving a problem that is very new, but it's going to ultimately be an age old problem for many years to come. And the way that you all are doing it, I find it very elegant, simple, yet sophisticated. When you look at things like TTPs, we've been speaking about how threat actors are accessing SaaS environments. When you look at the TTPs that are out there, especially the ones that we reviewed already, which ones does Nudge protect against better than all the other vendors out there?
Yeah, so I think our core, like the core promise is really starting with giving you that full visibility, right? We see a lot of companies in the SaaS security space where they focus on the very small percentage of apps that are important, but what we see is a lot of risk in the other 10,000 apps that are still in your environment and you are not paying attention to, right? I think we are doing a great job with those app to app integrations. So like OAuth management, that's like a place where we mitigate risk for you. We also help you with that employee offboarding, right? Think about a lot of the things that a lot of the things that companies do today is like only offboarding managed apps. So think about apps that have been provisioned by your IDP, or like they are in Okta. But then what about everything else that the employee, all the resources that the employee created in the last few years, and then you are not offboarding those resources? There's a lot of risk there as well. And then ultimately we want to be the platform where all these problems are solved at once, right? Like I truly believe that there is no reason why you should have 20 different products to solve this problem, right? Like you want to be the platform where your ITs and security teams and even finance teams come, understand the environment, reduce risk, manage applications, manage identities, etc. So the big play for us is really solving all these problems that are the result of like this fast SaaS adoption by companies today that is creating a lot of risk, and that we believe is not being mitigated properly by six existing vendors out there.
Being the new kid on the block and also being like someone that's very sought after because you all solve like a very fundamental problem for the modern organization. I'm sure your prospects, your customers are wondering where are you going? What is your intention with building this company? Are you hoping to become, the first billion-dollar cybersecurity startup leader? Are you hoping to change the world? If you had to summarize your end game or your vision for Nudge, how would you describe that?
Yeah, building a company where we are truly helping our customers get value and solving real problems, and not selling like smoke. That's like thing number one, right? When I see the reaction from prospects when they see the product, like it always makes me so happy that some of those reactions are great. Like I couldn't believe you can tell me this. I couldn't believe this was possible. And we see a lot of those reactions. Ultimately, it's about solving real problems for customers, working on hard and interesting technical problems with my team, and yes, helping solve a really hard problem and having fun while we do it.
That's what it's all about. I love that. I love that. And that's one of the reasons why I like working with you and the Nudge team is that, y'all are almost like a family. You're very authentic. You just want to see people succeed. And speaking of that, Nudge has also, invested their time and also sponsorship into Hacker Valley. So be sure to check out nudgesecurity.com/, Hacker Valley. It's the best way to get a little bit better at SaaS and also check out something new that could really help your organization. I wanted to give you one last question before we wrap up here, Jaime. If someone were to be interested in, checking out Nudge, what would you say that they can expect when entering in their information, maybe getting a demo? What can they expect after that?
Yeah, actually, we believe in like customers should just see it by themselves. So we have a free trial. You can go to our website, start a free trial without talking to us, and just see the value of the tool by yourself. So we truly believe in that experience. So if you have cycles, I will encourage you to go check it out, and either in your environment, in a test environment, and if for whatever reason you need more information, just book a call with us, and we will walk you through the details and answer any questions that you may have.
Love that. Check them out. Also, gotta just throw in a quick plug as well. I've had a chance to check out the platform. Y'all got a nice UI. I love the UI. It's amazing. It's very sleek and elegant. So kudos to you and the team for putting in the sweat equity there. Also, thanks again, Jaime, for jumping on the mics with us, spending a little bit of time out of your busy day to speak and educate our audience. It's always a pleasure. We got to play some pickleball soon. And also for anyone that wants to stay up to date with Jaime or Nudge, be sure to check them out in the event description. Jaime is listed as a speaker. You could also see Nudge and all of their information all across LinkedIn, their website, nudgesecurity.com. And be sure to check out them and tell them Hacker Valley sent you. And with that, we will see everyone next time.
Thank you.